Well, good afternoon. We're really glad you're here today, and we have a wonderful opportunity today. In fact, we scheduled the speaker a few weeks ago, and little did we know that he was going to take the interview up to a whole different level. And today, you're going to be able to hear Bill Simon. Bill served our military for 24 years. He was in the Navy. He's been married to Tammy for 30 years. They have 2 children. Bill served as the president and CEO of Walmart US. He's a business leader. We're going to talk to him some about that. We're going to talk to him about business. We're going to talk about what he's doing now. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. And at the end of the interview, we're going to talk about something that happened last week. And we're not going to talk about it until then. And he might look a little roughed up, and you might think that Tammy has finally won a fight. But that's not the case. And today, you're going to hear about all of that here at the summit. So today, it is with extreme honor to introduce to you my good friend who is alive and well today. To God's glory, would y'all welcome Bill Simon here today. Bill, thanks for coming. Have a seat right there, Bill.
How y'all doing?
And today we're going to have a conversation, and Bill's going to talk to me, he's going to talk to you, and talk to whoever's here today. He's had a lot of opportunities for interviews throughout the days and throughout his life. And so today we're going to really unpack as much as we possibly can. And we're going to be going a lot of different places. And so I really believe if you listen today, we have framed this interview and this conversation where you can really be encouraged, but you can also learn a lot about leadership. And so, Bill, I want to begin where we need to begin. I want you to tell your story today. Talk about your life, where you were raised. Give them the inside of who Bill Simon is, where your roots are, about your family today, and
Sure,
life.
I'll be happy to. Most people don't know this. My family are Lebanese Christians. My mother and father are born and raised Lebanese Christian. My father was born in a small town called Zahli in Lebanon. I was born in the U.S. and my brothers and sisters were all born in the U.S. But when we were young, my parents decided that we should move back to Lebanon. It wasn't back for us; it was the first time. And so I spent much of my childhood in and around Beirut, Lebanon, as a Christian in the middle of the Muslim Arab world, and saw firsthand just the struggles that go on there. I came back to the U.S. in 10th grade and to Connecticut, where much of my mother's family had settled, and went to University of Connecticut, UConn undergrad. And right after undergrad, I joined the Navy, and I was active duty in the Navy for 4.5 or 5 years, and had the privilege of serving my country, which incidentally, during that time, I was back on active duty on a U.S. Navy warship about a mile off the coast of Beirut, Lebanon again. So it seemed like no matter what happened, I would end up back there. And, it's one thing to be in a combat situation. It's completely another thing to be in a combat situation in a city that you spent some of your childhood with your grandparents in the middle of the war. And my grandparents were in the middle of the city and that was enveloped by war. So those experiences for me early on taught me how important that faith and family were. And that sort of has kind of guided my decision in my life all the way through there. So after the Navy, while I was in the Navy, I met a very beautiful and very charming nurse from North Carolina, my wife Tammy, and we met in September, we got engaged in December, and we got married in May. and have been married over 30 years, and every day is better than the last one. So love you, hey, wherever you are over there. After active duty in the Navy, I stayed in the reserves, went to graduate school back at UConn because it was a good school and it was free, on the VA bill, veterans benefits for me. Got a MBA in management and started my career. Started working, my first job after graduate school was at RJR Nabisco. I was third shift production manager at a cigarette factory. And think about what a glorious and glamorous start that was to a business career. I'm thinking to myself, graduate degree, Navy officer, and I'm working third shift in a factory. But I think that for me, one of those lessons in life is that you don't have to necessarily take what's been given. God has a plan for you, and so I worked my third shift, made cigarettes, and then I would go home and take a quick shower and go show up at the office again because I wanted to be in marketing. And I just started doing work. I started helping in marketing, and eventually they got tired of me hanging around during the day because I must have looked awful. I was staying up all night and making cigarettes and going in and helping out during the day in the marketing department. It eventually gave me a job in marketing, and that's when my career took off. So those are times of transformation and inflection points in your life that if you with God's grace, put out the effort that you can, and that everybody has to, you can change your own trajectory, and I think that sort of is the one of the greatest gifts, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, that God ever gives you is free will, and so you have the choice: go left, go right, go straight, go nowhere, and the decisions you make will impact your life.
Good. And so when you left there from the marketing job, where did you go after that?
I had a series of jobs in Fortune 500 companies that were really great learning experiences for me. I went from Nabisco to Pepsi to Dr. Pepper. Eventually found myself working in Miami, Florida, and governor of Florida at the time was Jeb Bush. And like most businesses in most states, when the governor's running for re-election, you give him a lot of money, especially one whose brother was the president and who was probably going to win by a landslide, which he did. So my company contributed money to his campaign, and after the election was over, one of his staff called me up and said, hey, the governor wants to invite you and a few of the business leaders to come to the Capitol and embed in one of the state agencies so that you can learn how, or maybe give us some advice on how these agencies might run more efficiently. And so his brother was the president, right? And he asked. So I called my boss, and my boss said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Why don't you go do it? So I spent a week at the Capitol in Tallahassee. At the end of the week, I spent a couple hours with the governor, and I made some recommendations on this state agency that I was working in for the week. And I thought nothing of it. Went home, and the next day my cell phone rang, and he said, Bill, this is Jeb Bush. I want you to come do all that stuff you said you could do. And I said, well, Governor, I didn't say I could do it. I said you could do it. And he said, I know you want to, so don't answer me now. Talk to your wife and call me back on Monday. And sure enough, I called him back on Monday, and I said, I don't know how you knew it, but I'm going to come and do it. I'll give you 2 years. And so I left, I was the president of this company at the time. I left and took an 800% pay cut to work for the state of Florida as the secretary of the Department of Management Services. And my son, Stephen, is a college senior now, was probably in fifth or sixth grade at that time. And he goes, Dad, now let me understand this. He goes, you were president of a company and you took a job as a secretary? So there you have it. So I got to understand and see how government works, and that was very impactful in my life and still is today. And we'll talk about this later. And I'm very proud to be able to help Jeb in his campaign now as he runs for president. And then when I left there, I had a brief stop at a company in Dallas, and I was recruited by Walmart. And I remember getting the first call to come up here and interview, and they said, Bill, you want to go up to Bentonville, Arkansas, and interview at Walmart? And I go, I am not moving to Arkansas. I'm from Connecticut. What are you kidding? It turns out, just as everybody said, it's the most wonderful place anybody could ever live. So
And so talk to us about your boys. You have two boys.
We do, two boys. Stephen is 22. He's senior-ish, senior and a half, whatever you call those, at Baylor. He's in engineering, in the engineering school with a computer science, software engineering degree. And I'm told, and I was told from the beginning, that it's a 5-year program, which kind of isn't fair, especially to the guy who has to write the check. But maybe to the kid who has to do it too. But he'll finish in May, knock on wood, God willing. And hopefully, end up with a good job, maybe even back here. Will is 17. He's a junior at Shiloh, and he is into everything that 17-year-old boys are into, and is a joy in my life. One of the gifts I've been given is in the last year is the ability to spend a lot more time with my younger boy, and now that I'm been back and forth to Baylor with my older boy. So. I can't complain. Life's good.
Tremendous. And so when you came to work for Walmart, talk about what you started doing, and then obviously where you ended up, and then I want to ask you a question about that.
I took the job at Walmart. I was initially hired in as executive vice president in an area they called specialty, which is pharmacy, and it was shoes and jewelry and a bunch of other stuff. That I really, frankly, knew nothing about, but they were interested in me because one of the things that I did for the governor in Florida was run the state healthcare benefits, and they were looking for somebody. The pharmacy business was the biggest piece of business in that group, and I've always been a fairly aggressive and action-oriented is probably a better word for it. In most aspects of my life, and so I joined the company I think in March, and started learning about pharmacy, and I frankly didn't know anything about it. I couldn't even pronounce most of the things that we were selling, and I didn't know what they would do, but I did notice that the profit margins on them were really, really high. And nothing at Walmart. The profit margin is not high on anything at Walmart, and so you start asking why, and the answer is that these products were all under contract either to the government through Medicare, Medicaid, or through insurance companies or pharmacy benefit managers, and the prices were all preset. So somebody came up with the idea, said, why don't we just lower the price? If we get the price below, low enough, the cost of the products are very low. If we get the price low enough, we can really make a difference in people's lives, and so. Joined the company in March. By July, we had figured out we could lower the price of generic medicines. This is 2006. Generic medicines to about $4 for most of them, and we launched it in September and rolled it out in probably I think October, November. And frankly, I remember the night before the launch, sitting there, couldn't sleep in bed. I'd been with the company like 2 cups of coffee at that point, and looked at Tammy and I said, I know we just moved to Arkansas, but this might be the shortest move we've ever had. If this doesn't work, they're going to get rid of me like the day after tomorrow. It turned out pretty good. We lowered the cost of healthcare. In fact, if you look and really ask yourself, it's the only thing that's actually lowered the cost of healthcare in the U.S. in the last 10 years. Lots of things moving around and shuffling around, but this actually lowered the cost, and it's phenomenal. It's helped people's lives, and it's probably one of the most impactful things I've ever done.
That's
Thanks.
Tremendous. And so after that, what happened?
So I guess they figured I sort of knew what I was doing, and after just about 10 months, 11 months, I got appointed Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. stores and was responsible for all the U.S. store operations, and I did that for about 3 years, I guess. I'm sort of losing track of time on what year I'm in, and they gave me the privilege of running the U.S., the biggest piece of business that Walmart has, and it was truly a gift.
And how long did you do that, Bill?
Yeah, 4 years, plus or minus, maybe 4.5, something like that.
So in relationship, when you look back and you say, well, I know I accomplished this, what were some of those accomplishments you felt that you were able to do as president and CEO of Walmart U.S.?
Everybody knows Walmart is a one-of-a-kind organization because of what it does, because of its scale, because of the impact that it can have, on the country. And I think Lee Scott said this, about Walmart's impact after Hurricane Katrina. The company responded so quickly and so well, and said, if we could be that company every day, imagine what would happen. And that was really the play that we were running with the $4 medication program. And I tried to find and look for opportunities at Walmart when I was there, where we could make that difference, because the size of the company is really an influencer in what happens in the country. And so we did some wonderful things. We helped donate money to Feeding America to help try to address hunger in this country. For me, I'm very passionate around veterans, and so we were able to make a commitment to hire every honorably discharged veteran who wanted a job in this country. They fought for their country. They shouldn't have to fight for a job. So if they came in, and we would find a place for them. And I think at Walmart we ended up, and are still on the program, hiring well over 100,000 veterans in just a short amount of time. And it's an honor, honestly, an honor to be able to do that. And probably most recently, and this is something that I'm still working on outside of Walmart, we're in a once-in-a-generation opportunity to restore a U.S. manufacturing base and really, really jumpstart our economy. Good jobs are harder and harder to find, and without a bridge from the service economy that exists today into the manufacturing economy, where entire families can be lifted up, we're not going to be the country that we want to be, and we're not going to be the families that we want to be, and we're not going to be the faith community that we want to be. And so if we can revitalize U.S. manufacturing, we'll start to see that resurgence of faith, family, and economy that we really need to address. And I've been passionate about that. We started that before I left Walmart, and I've been working on that in my spare time now.
Yeah, let's talk about that spare time. So now that you've been gone from Walmart, how long?
A little over a year.
Yeah. So you've been gone from a year or so. So tell us what you're doing with your time, because this is a great story. So tell us what you're doing.
Well, I'm kind of into everything, and it's this. I recently found out retirement's a little dangerous, so we'll get to that in a minute. But I first and foremost, I'm the treasurer and the chief financial officer of Jeb 2016. Honored to help him try to fight this fight. It's been interesting. It's as in every campaign, there's ups and downs and ups again, and so we're in the middle of it. And I don't think anybody would have scripted it the way that it is right now, but I like where we are, and I think we see a pathway forward. So that's taking up a lot of my time. I am doing some consulting work as a senior advisor for KKR, which is the largest investment banking firm in the country, and enjoy that tremendously. They're great people, and the ability to be in and out of so many different businesses sort of keeps my ADD muscle itched there, and that's terrific. I was asked to and agreed to take a position at Baylor University, which is, as you know, the largest Baptist university in the country, as executive in residence, and I'm teaching down there. And I recently joined the Board of Regents at Baylor. So I've got that going on, and I'm down in Waco a fair amount these days. On the board of Darden Restaurants, the parent company of Olive Garden, and several others. So I'm very, very busy, and spending time when I'm not traveling around the house bugging my wife.
That's good. So let's talk about let's leave the governor to the side for a moment. But I mean, it's pretty interesting when you talk about being the treasurer of the campaign. What does the treasurer of a political campaign do?
There's only two people that are actually, I'm told, on the Federal Election Commission documents. One is the candidate, and two is the treasurer. And I think the candidate is the candidate, and the treasurer is the guy who gets sued for everything, as far as I can tell right now.
That's about it, huh? Liability.
Something like that. I'm helping manage the budget, not the collection side, but the expenditure side. And it's a pretty good candidate who gets a guy who ran Walmart, one of the most frugal companies in the world, to run your campaign budget. So it's been a pleasure and a challenge all at the same time.
Yeah, and so especially now, I mean, we obviously are in a unique time in the political environment. I'm not asking you to talk about the candidates, not asking you to talk about the governor, but I am asking you, tell us what you see from where you sit, based off your past and looking at the present. What in the world is happening in the political realm from the way you view it from your seat in life?
Pastor, I said this earlier, one of the greatest, if not the greatest gift that God gave us was free will. And free will is what allows us to have salvation. It allows us to choose to follow. It allows us to believe. Without free will, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so as Christians, we exercise our free will, and we are today. Yet as citizens, we've sort of stopped doing that. We now wait for the jobs report to come out, for the government to tell us whether we're doing well or we're not. We wait for them to tell us how many jobs they've created, as if the government could ever create a job. They don't. We do. We wait for them to tell us whether the GDP went up or went down, whether we're in a recession, whether we should feel bad or feel good, what the interest rates are going to be. So do we start a business or not? Do we borrow money for a car or buy a new house? We've abdicated our free will, the God-given gift that we have as free will, to somebody else. In many cases, the government. In other cases, other people. And as Americans and as Christians, we've got to exercise that free will to make a difference in the lives of our families, in our faith, and in our economy. And I believe the economy and family and faith and church are inextricably connected together. Strong families attend church, and they have higher household incomes, and they care about their children's future, and you get on a really productive growth cycle. But sadly, half of the children born in the U.S. are born to single mothers today, and so it's harder and harder for them to cross that bridge into the middle class, and that exercise of free will becomes more and more challenged the more and more things aren't the way they used to be when we were growing up. And we can change that, and we need to change that. Part of it is who we elect as a leader, but most of it is how we as people, as human beings, as Christians, as Americans, decide we're going to move forward. Are we going to wait for the next jobs report to find out whether we're doing well? Or are we going to go and make that investment? Are we going to go hire somebody, expand our business, or get a better job, or work 2 jobs if we have to make our kids' lives better? Or are we just going to wait for the next minimum wage increase or whatever it is? And I just think that we're at a place and stage in our countries where we don't have a whole lot more time to wait, and that the solution isn't going to come from an election or from a law or from a policy. It's going to come from here, and it's going to come from here, from each and every one of us. And I believe those are God's gifts.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, you still could jump in if you want to. I mean, that's a pretty good speech.
Well, we'll see. I think this was the year for outsiders. The next one, they'll probably want an insider, so too late.
Now, Bill, one of the things that you're doing right now is you're serving, as of June, as a member of the Board of Regents of Baylor University. Tell us about Baylor.
Yeah, I didn't go to Baylor. I didn't really know much about it. My son was looking for a school and picked the School of Engineering there, and we kind of went down there, and it's a very, very a special place if you haven't been down there. The current president and chancellor is Judge Ken Starr, and you may remember him from political world not too long ago. And Judge Starr and his wife Alice are just doing a phenomenal job leading that Baptist Christian university in an environment that's very nurturing. And much like I was just sort of describing to you, the university's mission, and they don't shy away from it, is to create worldwide leaders in Christian faith, and they don't shy away from it. And praying is okay. And I believe, and it's kind of what I was just talking about, that the situation that we're in as a country is one where academic or economic solution isn't really the whole answer. If it were, Harvard's a great school. There's wonderful universities out there that have academic and economic prowess that is unmatched anywhere in the globe. And if it were the case, things would be solved already, right? We would be on our way moving forward. If this were just an academic exercise and economists could figure it out, we'd be done. But it isn't. It's so much more than that. The faith and the family and the community and the economy are tied together in a way that I think has to be addressed by a university that actually recognizes that and isn't afraid to address it. And so when I got to know who Judge Starr was and what was going on down at Baylor, I wanted to be part of it because I really do believe that that's where the solutions are going to come from.
And so we're working to get Judge Starr here at the summit. And so you tell him that we told everybody that he's coming.
I'll tell him. I'll see him tomorrow.
All right. We just don't know when, but he has committed prayerfully, and
You have to come to that one. He's just an incredible guy, an incredible speaker, and he's got some stories, trust me.
I imagine. So, Bill, for a moment, tell me when we talk about the greatest lessons of leadership, I want to ask you a series of places. Tell me, what is your greatest or a couple of the greatest lessons of leadership you learned from your military background?
Well, I mean, life is a quilt. You know, you sort of stitch together pieces of it. And so from every aspect of my life, I've learned stuff. And I try, if I'm not learning things, I figure it's time to move on and do something else. My time in the military taught me so many things. Personal discipline aside, I was a college kid in the 70s. So, with all that goes along with that, and it turns out in the military, you can't call in sick. You got to get a haircut. There's certain personal discipline aspects of it. But for me, the biggest leadership lesson I learned was that doesn't matter what position you hold or what rank is on your collar, that there's a difference between personal authority and positional authority. And the kind of authority that God wants us to have is personal authority. Positional authority is sometimes nice and it's sometimes helpful. But you got to treat people the way that you would like to be treated or the way that they need to be treated in order to get the best out of them. And one of my favorite funny stories is I think I'd just been commissioned an officer, a brand new gold bar on my collar, and I was feeling like somebody. You know what I'm saying? I was like, right here. And my first paycheck as an officer was messed up. I think it was off by like $12. $12 was a lot when you're only making like, I don't know, $10,000 or whatever it was. So I went into the payroll clerk, an young enlisted sailor, and I said, you need to fix my paycheck. My paycheck's messed up, and I'm an officer, and I need my paycheck fixed. Do you understand that? And he goes, oh, yes, sir, I'll fix your pay. I'll fix your pay. And he sure fixed my pay. I think it was 3 years before it got sorted out. I was in a fix. And I sort of realized right there that approach doesn't work in life. It doesn't work in the military. And just because somebody said you were somebody, you're not somebody until you actually are. And so that was, for me, the biggest lesson.
That's a pretty good statement. So talk to us about what the business world taught you about leadership.
I think in the business world, you've got to try to find a way as you leader and as you move up in the levels. I would say I have no particular. I'm an expert in nothing, and I can't really do anything. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not great at anything. I'm pretty good at a lot of things. And you asked me what my biggest skill was, it was simplifying things. I can take complicated things and make them simpler, at least explain them simply. And that's what people need. They need from a business world. I sort of learned that you don't have to pass everything down. You just have to pass the things that are important down. You have to be a filter and provide vision and guidance for people. And I think if you'd ask me what I was good at, that's what I would tell you that I was good at. Everything else, I can fake it, but I'm not an expert at anything. Leadership, I think, is about making people feel like they're working for something bigger than what they are, or than they think they are, and then providing clarity and purpose for them going forward. And that's what I took out of the business world.
And so when you look at the political world today, just observing what you're doing now, you kind of have an inside seat, but at the same time you're far enough away. What does the political world teach you about leadership?
Yeah, good question. I think in the world of politics today, it's so hard to sort things out, like what's what and who's who. And the very best question I've heard in this political season, and I think you were there, was a young lady who goes to Shiloh Christian, was at a fundraiser that we held at our house for Jeb. And President Bush, his brother, was in attendance. And this young lady, you know, a 17-year-old senior at Shiloh, takes a lot of courage to ask a question in front of hundreds of adults, never mind to the former president of the United States. And she raised her hand and asked a question, and she said, Mr. President, I'll be voting in my first election. What should I look for in a candidate? How do you decide between candidates? They all say things, and they all say things that sound good. And the president jokingly said, well, don't worry about it, just vote for Jeb. And then of course, he gave the best answer that I've heard to one of the best questions. And he said, you have to look at the core of the person. You have to find out who they are. And what he meant by that was that in those quiet, dark nights when you're alone in the Oval Office or in the residence, and you've heard all the advice that people can give you, and you know that the decision is yours, those decisions will be made by what's in you. And when you're trying to figure out who to vote for and who should be your leader, look to their core. And if you can't find their core, then you probably ought to not be voting for them.
That's pretty good. That's great. Yeah. Now, Bill, we just have a few minutes left. But last week something happened in your life. It was quite dramatic, extremely challenging. In fact, it could have cost your life, and you as well as 2 other men, and even more. But I want to show our people today, and something that maybe you saw in the news, maybe you didn't, maybe you don't have a clue about what I'm talking about, but when you hear about it and you see it, you'll probably remember that you did hear about it in the busy, noisy world in which we live in. So let's take a look at the screen for a moment. Let's see what our guys put together for us to review.
We begin tonight, though, with our top story pretty much throughout the day. Today, a small plane makes an emergency landing and parachutes onto Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Fayetteville, right near Fayetteville High School and right near the U of A.
Just a couple hours after they got to school, students and staff at Fayetteville High School watched a plane make an emergency landing just 100 yards away from the school.
We were having what we thought was going to be a normal school day, then all of a sudden we started hearing reports of there's a plane that has gone down on MLK Boulevard. Word spread very quickly as to what was going on.
Police say the pilot, identified as former Walmart CEO Bill Simon, his co-pilot Cliff Slinkard, and passenger Maurice Willis were all taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
The pilot deployed that parachute whenever he realized he was going to have a catastrophic failure.
A woman who was in the pickup truck that was hit by the plane as it came down was also taken to the hospital. Police say Shamika Harris is expected to be okay.
And it's the first time I can recall we've ever had a plane land on a major highway in the city of Fayetteville.
Police say the fixed-wing single-engine Cirrus aircraft started having oil pressure issues immediately after takeoff.
The FAA or NTSB will be the ones to determine what caused the accident.
Meanwhile, the safety of students inside the school was never a concern to staff.
We have crisis plans that we practice for all types of emergencies.
Police and staff at Fayetteville High School say they're just grateful everything ended the way it did.
We're extremely fortunate that it landed where it did, whether that was due to the ability of the pilot or happenstance. Either way, it could have been so much worse.
Bill, you were
I hadn't seen that before. I saw it live, and I hadn't really watched any of the tape,
Yeah.
so I figured.
Yeah, and you were on that plane. In fact, like you were the pilot on that plane.
That's right.
And
But before we go on, let me just introduce that. I'm sure this won't surprise you. The media wasn't actually exactly accurate in that report. The co-pilot was my friend Trey Willis here, who's one of the best pilots I've ever met in my life, and a good friend, Trey. And one of my very best buddies, Cliff Slinkard. Cliff, I'm so glad to see you. Glad you're here. But yeah,
so
we decided to go for a ride.
Man? Tell us what happened.
Well, I fly down to Baylor every Tuesday, and this particular Tuesday, I needed to come back that same evening, and it was going to be dark. And if you recall, it was the first Tuesday after daylight savings time, and So Trey was around, and I said, Trey, why don't you fly down with me so that we can, I can have a safety pilot. It's going to be a long day, and it'll be dark when we come back. And then Cliff just said, hey, you guys are going to Waco and coming back in the same day? I think I'll just ride along.
Good decision, Cliff.
We were going to get some barbecue, and then, I was going to teach a class, and then we were going to come back. Nice day, huh? We had just taken off, and we 10 minutes out, and had gotten up to our cruising altitude at 10,000 feet, and saw a yellow warning light for low oil pressure come on the airplane. And the airplane's been good. It's only about a year and a half old. I bought it right about the time I was leaving Walmart. And, immediately that oil, I don't know if anybody knows anything about engines, knows that engines need oil to run. And so when the oil pressure is going out of an engine, it's a fairly serious thing. Right at that point, we still had power, and we weren't sure how quickly the engine oil was leaving. So we made a turn towards the nearest field, which was Drake Field in Fayetteville, and Trey was ably working the radios, called air traffic control and told them that we were losing oil pressure. And we started to make a very rapid descent to get lined up with a runway and try to land the thing before the engine went away. And, it was a cloudy, overcast day. We couldn't see the runway, so we needed some help trying to find it. So we made a couple turns, and in a pretty steep and rapid descent, tried to level off at 3,300 feet, which is the altitude that you need to clear the hills that are surrounding the airport. And right about then, the red light came on, and the engine stopped. It decided it didn't want to put out any more power, and we sunk down to about 2,500. And that's easy math right there. When you need to be at 33 and you're at 25 or 24 and you've got no power. And so God decided to put us in an airplane that day that had a parachute, a ballistic parachute, and a rocket that fires a parachute through the side of the airplane. And at that point, when we knew we weren't going to make it to the ground, we said we're going down under the canopy, and I reached up and I pulled the handle, and the rest is on the video.
And so, how many planes have parachutes?
Pastor, this is an incredible story, and if you weren't a believer already, you just have to know this. The odds of crashing in a small plane are 2.5 per 100,000 hours flown, right? So that would be 0.0003 for round numbers, right? 0.0003. So that's pretty low odds, right? There's about 250,000 registered airplanes, non-airline airplanes in this country, and 5,000 of them, 1 in 20, have a parachute on them. And so if you start calculating those odds, it's 0.0000006 that you would crash in a small plane that had a parachute. And then if you figure that you land in the middle of one of the busiest streets in the area, across the street from the high school, a couple hundred yards from the university, in the middle of the day, and the worst thing that would happen would be a couple of black eyes. You start approaching odds that are incalculable. And then on top of that, and I hope my friend doesn't mind me saying this, Cliff, who wasn't hurt from the crash at all, stiff neck, I think, was being checked out well by the first responders, who, by the way, I think were there before we landed, which is crazy. I mean, the fire department in Fayetteville and the police department were absolutely phenomenal, never mind the people at Washington Regional, so I want to thank all of them as well. But while they were checking out Cliff, just to make sure, they found a previously undiagnosed illness that needed immediate treatment. And, it turns out this whole thing, was probably one of the most wonderful events in my life. So, and then if you start trying to calculate those odds that somebody on the plane needed medical care that we didn't know about from something else, you start approaching odds that you can't ever even calculate. And that's because, our God doesn't do odds. There's no odds. There's only one explanation.
Wow. Now, Bill, You knew you were in trouble about 5 minutes, is what you told me, something like
Yeah,
that?
from the time the light went on till the time we pulled was just about 5 minutes.
Okay,
Yep.
and you then pulled the parachute. Now, were you explaining to the guys what would happen, or what you hoped would happen?
Well, that handle's always there, and every flight you do a pre-flight on, and you look at the handle. But I never pulled it before, so wasn't 100% sure what would happen. I'd done it in a simulator, and they probably like you to pull a little higher than we were. You need about 600 feet above the ground. We were probably 1,200 feet above the ground when we pulled. The clouds were at 800 feet above the ground, so we were actually above the clouds when we pulled. And they'd like you to be at 2,000 feet above the ground. And the way this thing works is it's a rocket and a parachute that's embedded in the body of the plane, and it blasts a hole right in the top of the airplane, and the parachute expands. And when it comes out, first of all, it deploys the airplane, and you can see it on some of the videos. I think it was on there. I wasn't really looking. You're literally nose down in the parachutes, and it does that on purpose because it needs to slow your forward speed. So here we are, and you'd be surprised. There was no screaming like little babies in the plane, and we were all relatively calm all the way through it. We were trying to fly the plane, and Trey was working the radios and inputting things into the flight computer, and I was flying the plane, trying to get turned around. So it was calm, it was quiet, and I believed, I knew that whatever was going to happen, we were in God's hands, and so we were trying to work the problem because God gives us free will and a brain to try to work the problem. And our first sight of where we were was face down, looking like this, hanging from the straps from a parachute, and we're looking at MLK and Fayetteville High School going, oh, well, this is not really looking good. And then, we knew that in a moment that after the plane slowed down that the second strap would release and we would level out. And we did that, and we were probably under the parachute a total of 20 seconds.
So from the moment you pulled the parachute, 20 seconds to the ground.
That's about right, yep.
And you didn't know, you knew directionally where you were to some degree, but you couldn't see where you were because the cloud cover.
We knew we were 3 miles north of the runway in Fayetteville, and we didn't know we would land on a sidewalk on MLK. We did.
So Bill, like in those 4 or 5 minutes like that you just, that's pretty much uncertainty. And I know you were obviously busy dealing with a lot of stuff, but looking back, how did your faith carry you through that moment?
I think everybody's different. For me, at that moment, I was fairly serene, and I won't say I wasn't nervous. I was nervous, but I wasn't worried, and I wasn't worried because I was good before I got into the plane. I knew what was going to happen before I got into the plane, and I would always tell anybody who would ask that I think every time I flew down there, Jesus was in the plane with me. I just think that's how you have to live your life, and I would say, well, he's either there to save me or get me where I'm going faster if it doesn't work out that way. But you don't know the answers to those questions, and you just got to be right before you ever even get on a plane like that, or before you ever even do anything. You got to be right with God or right with yourself.
So Bill, and obviously for these two men as well, you know where you've been. You are a man today. You're never going to be the same again. And you have a deep purpose for your life because, it's a miracle you're here. It's a miracle these men are here. And so with that, God's left you here. And talk to us about that before we close.
God puts you where he wants you all the time, every day, every minute. He brought you here today for some reason. Maybe it was the wonderful food. Maybe it was, the people that are sitting at your table, and maybe it was to hear something. I don't know what it is. Don't ever forget that. For me, I've been waking up in the morning way more joyful than I was. There's not a lot to complain about in my life right now. There never really has been. I've been very blessed all the way through. But, like most people, we generally find reasons to grumble. And for me, I sort of look at life and the gift that we've been given as the opportunity to make an impact and make a difference. And I don't want to do things anymore. I've had some incredible job offers since I left Walmart, some really fun ones, some really, really profitable ones. I didn't want to do them now, and I really definitely don't want to do them going forward, because life is too short to do things without meaning that don't fall into your plan or God's plan for you. And so for me, as I think about going forward, I'm going to wake up every day joyful. I'm gonna know that whatever it is that God has planned for me, which I wish it would come in the mail or a text or something, but it doesn't work that way either. You pray and you live your life, and you live your life with the people that you love, making an impact on as many people's lives as you possibly can. And you do that prayerfully, and I'm very thankful to be here. I consider myself so very, very blessed by this whole thing, not because we were spared or put on the ground in the way we were, but because how many people get a chance to witness God's incredible grace and stare it right smack in the eye and smile. So I'm happy as can be, and committed to tell this story. And interestingly enough, I've had, I don't know, and I know the guys have too. The press is really interesting. I'm in phone calls by every talk show on Fox and Good Morning America, and George Stephanopoulos contacted me the other day and wanted me to go on the air. And I said, this is a story that needs to be told in church. It doesn't need to be on Good Morning America. This is a story about faith and how wonderful God is, and the work that he does in our lives, and the opportunities that he gives us to change other people's lives. And that's the story that needs to be told, and that for me is the biggest learning.
Well, quite a day, huh? Bill, thank you. Let me just tell you, I love you and I admire you, and I'm so grateful you were willing to talk today. You have made us all better, and you've called us up. And to you two men over there, we are so rejoicing that you're here. And Cliff, we will pray for you, and just pray that God will heal your body, touch you in every way. And we pray God's best on all three of you and upon your families, and we rejoice with you. Would y'all give? Say one of the word. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you. Your support for the last several years has meant the world to me. I appreciate everything. I love you too.
Well, thank you, Bill. But let's give Bill a wonderful thank you today. Thank you, Bill Simon. You're incredible. And we give God praise for your life.